Veganism wasn't a part of my vocabulary until about 2 years ago. I, like I'm sure many of you, grew up thinking of veganism as this extreme lifestyle, impossible to follow, ridiculous in its nature, and unattainable, designed solely for the hippies and tree huggers of the world. I mean, who would ever think of giving up eggs, milk, and cheese? How could you say no to cookies, cakes, and pizza? But little did I know, I would soon become one of those hippies. Let me start from the beginning. Dietarily, I was like most kids. I was raised in a Tamil Brahmin family where we didn't eat meat, but we sure loved our milk, eggs, and cheese. I grew up eating pizza, chapati with dollops of ghee, dai sadam, the staple of a Tamilian's diet, cookies, cakes, and milkshakes galore. Milk was probably my all-time favorite drink. My mom would say that when I drank it, my eyes would glaze over in utter bliss because of the joy drinking it gave me. Now, I say this to you to show that my life didn't differ much from yours. I didn't come from a family of forest dwellers, or a family of savage, radical activists, or even a family that stuffs raw lettuce, carrots, and beets down your throat. I mean, who does that? No. I came from a family, from an upper middle class family. The only difference being, through a string of realizations and eureka moments, I turned vegan. I stand here today to show you the hidden and tragic world that was exposed to me. And I'm not here to tell you what to do, how to think, how to feel, and I'm definitely not here to tell you what to eat. I'm here solely to present information, to show you the world as it is. To start off, I have a question for all of you. Here are 2 lines. Now, despite what you may think, these 2 lines are not identical. One line is, in fact, longer than the other. Now, how many of you think that the red line is longer? Okay. How many of you think that the blue line is longer? All right. Now, before I said anything about these 2 lines, what were your initial thoughts? That they're both equal, right? Well, in fact, you're correct. They are equal. But I was able to get so many of you to raise your hands claiming that one was longer than the other. So, why did I do this? I did this to show how easily we can be manipulated and conditioned into believing something that goes against our natural instinct. Say as a child, you were told that the red line is longer than the blue line. If you heard it enough number of times, you convince yourself that it is the truth. If you're taught the lie enough number of times, you convince yourself that it is the reality. If enough people are taught this lie, it becomes a part of the culture. And if that culture passes along this false information onto the next generation, it becomes tradition. Now, we need to remember that tradition, just because something is tradition, it doesn't make it morally acceptable or right. Tradition and morality don't always go hand in hand. Can you think of any examples of this? Any examples where tradition doesn't necessarily dictate morality?
Child marriage.
Exactly. Even other examples. In India, we have the caste system and untouchability. It once was, and to this day still is, in many parts of India, considered acceptable. But in the name of tradition, does that make it right? What about slavery? Does its existence for centuries make it morally right? No. Therefore, we can presume that just because something is tradition, and a tradition we follow today, doesn't make it morally acceptable just because we've been doing it for millennia. So this lie that's been perpetuated throughout society, the story about the animals we consume that we're told every day, is said so often that it's ingrained in our culture and become tradition. The story we're told about animals grazing in open grasslands, happy cows providing milk for us to drink, pigs blissfully wrestling in the mud, chickens contentedly clucking away. This is a story that if we believe this truly is where our milk, eggs, and meat come from, we're deceiving ourselves. It's a story we're told. It's a story that we've been fed by the industries again and again to get us to buy their products. It's a lie, a fantasy we tell ourselves to appease our conscience. The reality behind it is much harsher. 56 billion animals are killed every year. 3,000 animals are slaughtered every second. The milk, eggs, and dairy industries that hold these pigs, cows, and chickens claim so much land that they're responsible for 91% of Amazon deforestation. Greenhouse emissions from the animal agriculture industry is considered to be greater than the sum of emissions from all the transportation in the world. We have habitat loss, species extinction, and ecosystem destruction, all to pave the way for factory farming. And what is factory farming? It is an exploitative industry that is designed to maximize profit and produce. You have endless rows in the poultry industry. You have endless rows of chickens cooped up in small cages, no bigger than a milk crate. These chickens, they barely have space to spread even a wing, confined for long periods of time in these small spaces, and they tend to get aggressive. They get anxious. As a result, they start pecking at each other out of this frustration from the intense confinement. And they start pecking at each other and hurting themselves, almost pecking themselves to death. And as a result, and to avoid this, at 1 to 10 days old, their beaks are cut off with a hot blade to prevent this. And a hen's beak is incredibly sensitive, the equivalent of human fingertips. Now, what about in the egg industry? In the egg industry, the sole purpose is to produce and sell the maximum number of eggs possible. How do they do this? They ensure the hens keep laying eggs. However, only the females are vital to this process. What happens to the baby male chicks, baby newborn male chicks? Well, they're not useful to the industry, so they get ground up. Newborn chicks, almost immediately after hatching, are ground up alive and while being thrown into an industrial grinder. As for the chickens, they're fed antibiotics and growth hormones to make them bigger and fatter at faster rates because we want more meat quickly. What about the dairy industry? No harm in milking cows, right? After all, how else will your bones get stronger? Let's look at the story we've been told. How many of us are raised to believe that cow's milk makes our bones stronger? Okay. Now, specifically, we're talking about cows, not primates like chimpanzees or gorillas, who are more genetically similar to us. But cows, how absurd is that? It really makes no sense. But the absurdity of it starts to fade away once you're told the narrative more often. You need to drink cow's milk. Suddenly, it's the norm, and drinking any other kind of milk becomes absurd. But let's say yes, cow's milk does help strengthen our bones. What is it in the milk that we need? Calcium. Calcium helps strengthen our bones. Now let's look at the countries that drink the most milk. Now, osteoporosis is a condition where our bones become weaker and more brittle. And what are we told? Milk makes our bones stronger. Well, how is this possible? Well, the animal protein in milk, it makes our body more acidic. And in order to neutralize it, calcium is taken out from our bones, and as a result, we lose bone density and get weaker bones. So, let me get this straight. The more cow's milk we drink, the weaker our bones become? That's insane. We were raised thinking the exact opposite. Milk is considered one of the staple foods in our diet. Well, this is the power of a well-said narrative. But what about the cows? I mean, at least they're fine, right? Well, in order to keep producing milk, cows, like all mammals, need to be pregnant and have calves, because the only reason they lactate is to feed their calves. Now, how do they make sure these cows are constantly pregnant? They're artificially inseminated. These cows, after giving birth, they have their calves immediately taken away from them, causing immense stress between the calf and the mother. The mother has to endure this emotional trauma repeatedly every time she's impregnated. And the male calves of the industry are taken away to be tied up and slaughtered as veal, while the females are sent back into the dairy industry. These calves are denied the milk that will help them develop into fully grown cows. And if you think about it, we're drinking the milk that has hormones and nutrients to turn that small calf into a large cow. And we're drinking all that milk. That's way more than we need. In fact, we're the only mammalian species to continue to drink milk beyond the developmental stages. Now, when milking the cows, they're attached to machines that milk them automatically. And these machines leave these cows with infections. To prevent the spread of these infections, because in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions such as these, they're ideal for the spread of infections. And to prevent it, these animals are drowned in antibiotics. 80% of the antibiotics sold in the US are sold for livestock. And surprise, surprise, these antibiotics get into the milk that we consume at the end of the day. This is one of the leading causes of antimicrobial resistance, which is a growing public health issue. This same narrative continues for pigs, ducks, and all other animals victimized by the animal industry. We are told that we'll see fishless oceans by 2048. The fishing industry is just as brutal an industry and is unfortunately less recognized for its inhumane practices across the world. And this only encompasses the ethical aspects of the animal industry. Despite the fact that we're killing an animal that does not want to die, the meat we get from them has been linked to some of the biggest killers of our world today, cardiovascular diseases. The WHO reports that processed and red meats such as bacon and ham are considered carcinogenic. And even the UN urges the world to shift towards a meat and dairy-free diet as a way to save the world from hunger, poverty, and the impacts of climate change. Now, the reasons to go vegan are endless. The health benefits, the environmental benefits, the animal cruelty aspects, and how biologically we're better suited for a herbivorous diet. There are so many articles, websites, documentaries, and guides to help you better understand veganism and understand it in more detail and explore this lifestyle. The vegan diet is a wholesome, nutritious, and delicious diet that caters to all our requirements. At the end of the day, this is a global social movement which increasingly more and more people are adopting as part of the fight towards achieving a more cruelty-free, peaceful world. When we can live in a world without unnecessary suffering, why are we paying our money to perpetuate this system of exploitation? Veganism offers a sustainable alternative and is possibly the inevitable path we may have to embrace for a better future. Thank you.